Good day, boys and girls. Welcome back to Mr. Pui's English class. Today, we are going to take a look at simple past tense, regular form. Today's views are, I can write the sentences correctly, and I can also use punctuation correctly. Let's take a look at simple past tense. Simple past tense is used to describe action that has already happened. The keyword may be last Sunday, yesterday, last week, and etc. It is also used to tell a story. Here are some rules for simple past tense regular form. Rule number 1. If the verbs end with an E, we plus D. Rule number 2. If the verbs end with a Y, you can add IED. Rule number 3 applies to most of regular verbs. You just add ED. Let's take a look at a few examples. Rule number 1. Let's take a look at this picture. This is create. Create. Repeat after me. Create. So this verb ends with an E, and we can use the rule number 1 to transform the verb into its simple past tense form. What we need to do is just to add D. So the simple past tense form for create is created. C-R-E-A-T-E-D. Created. Let's take a look at the second one. This action is bake. Bake. Same thing. This verb ends with an E, and we can use rule number 1 to transform this verb into its simple past tense form. What we need to do is to add a D. So the simple past tense form for bake is baked. Baked. B-A-K-E-D. Let's move on to rule number 2. What is this? Dry. Take a look at this verb. The verb dry ends with a Y. So, if the verb ends with a Y, we can use rule number 2, which is to add IED, but we cancel the Y. So, the simple past tense form for dry is dried. Dried. D-R-I-E-D. Bear in mind that we will cancel the Y and add I-E-D. Let's try another one. What's the action? Correct. It's fry. Look at the verb F-R-Y. It ends with Y. Once again, we can use rule number 2 to transform the verb to its simple past tense form. What we need to do is to cancel the Y and plus I-E-D. So the simple past tense form for fry is fried. Fried. F-R-I-E-D. Easy peasy. Let's move on to rule number 3. This rule number 3 applies to those verbs that cannot use rule number 1 or rule number 2. For example, this action, it's wash. Wash. So, this verb does not end with E, does not end with Y, so we just basically use the rule number 3, which is to add ed. So the simple past tense form for wash is washed, washed, W-A-S-H-E-D. Let's move on to the next one. Take a look at this verb. This is very good. This is kick. Let's take a look at this verb very carefully. Is this verb ending with an E? No. Is this verb ending with a Y? No. We can't use rule number 1. We can't use rule number 2. So we can use rule number 3. What we need to do is just to add ed. So the simple past tense form for kick is kicked, kicked, K-I-C-K-E-D. Okie dokie, let's move on to the next one. What action is this? Correct, it's bag, bag. This action or this verb is a little bit special because this follows the CVC pattern. You must be asking, what is CVC pattern? Let's take a look. The letter V here refers to vowels, which are the sounds of A, E, I, O, U, and many other sounds. Whereas C refers to the consonants, which are the sounds that are not vowels. For example, the B, K, D, F, and many more. So let's take a look at this word here. The first letter, a B, is a consonant. The second letter is an E sound, which is a vowel. And the third one, G, is a consonant. So these 3 letter sounds make a CVC pattern. So why is this CVC pattern very important? Because we are going to double the last consonant. I repeat, we are going to double the last consonant. So instead of adding ED, we have to add GED to make the simple past tense form bagged, bagged, which is BEGGED. This only applies to words or verbs that has the CVC pattern. Alright, before we try out some other examples, let's take a look at these 3 rules again. The first rule, if the verbs end with an E, we can add D. For example, the word bake becomes baked. As for rule number 2, if the verbs end with a Y, we can cancel the Y and add IED. For example, the word tried. If the word cannot follow rule number 1 or rule number 2, we move on to rule number 3, which is simply just add ed. For example, the word washed. However, there are always exceptions in the rules. Please be careful. Now, you are going to try some other examples. Are you ready? Let's go. I have given you here 8 verbs. You are going to list the simple past tense form for the verbs below. The first one we have accept. Second one we have admire. Third one we have admit. Number 4, amuse. Number 5, apologize. Number 6, bathe. Number 7, blush. Number 8, berry. You can refer back to rule number 1, number 2, and number 3 to help you answer this. You can stop this video to answer. Alright, welcome back. I'm sure you have already answered the questions. Now, let's check the answer. For the first one, the verb accept, the simple past tense form is accepted. We plus ed. Did you get it correct? Wonderful. Number 2, admire. The simple past tense form for admire is admired. Because the word ends with an E, we just put D. This is rule number 1. Move on to number 3, admit. The simple past tense form for admit is admitted. Admitted. The reason why we add TED is because the last 3 letters, MIT, or the sound I, T, is a CVC pattern, so we double the last consonant, a double T here. Number 4, amuse. Look at the verb, it ends with an E. Correct, rule number 1. Amused. Number 5, apologize. Look at the word, it ends with an E. Very good. Rule number 1. We just add D, apologized. Similar to number 6, bathe. It ends with E. Again, rule number 1. So we just add D, becomes bathed. As for number 7, blush. Look at the last letter, it's H. Can we apply rule number 1? No, we can't. What about rule number 2? No, we can't. So we simply just use rule number 3, which is to add ED, blushed, BLUSHED. For the last one, number 8, we have berry. It ends with a Y. Rule number 2. Very good. We cancel the Y plus IED becomes buried. BURIED. Did you get all of them correct? Very good. I'm so proud of you. Before we go, once again, we are going to revise these 3 simple past tense rules. For rule number 1, if the verbs end with an E, we can use D. For example, the word bathed. For the verbs end with Y, we cancel the Y and we plus IED. For example, the word tried. If the verb cannot follow rule number 1 or rule number 2, we can simply just add ED to the verb, which is rule number 3. For example, the word washed. Now, I have another question for you. What is the simple past tense form for the word believe? Let me know your answer in the comment below. That's all for today. Goodbye. Alright, boys and girls, that's all for today. Thank you for joining me at Mr. Pui's English class. See you again. If you like Mr. Pui's English class video, please click like here and also click on the subscribe button. Bye.